Thank you for joining the webcast, Building a Business Around Desktop as a Service. We've got great content from two industry experts to share with you today. Let me introduce you to today's presenters. Dave Peternell works with DaaS Partner Enablement at Xtium powered by VMware. He has been working with and enabling Desktop as a Service partners for the past 3.5 years and has been a user of virtual desktops. Jim Garrity is Vice President of Enterprise Solutions at Xtium. He is responsible for Xtium's business operations and service experience. Jim has deep expertise in operations research, security, and cryptography applicable within banking, finance, healthcare, telecommunication, and public sectors. And with that, I'll turn it over to our first presenter, Jim Garrity.
Thank you very much. Today's agenda, what we're going to be doing is we're going to begin by discussing bring your own device trends in the market today. Then we'll move into the desktop as a service market opportunities and the VMware desktop as a service solution and platform overview. We'll conclude our discussion with a desktop as a service real life example and how to partner with Xtium to offer the VMware desktop as a service solution to your customers. So on the next slide, who is Xtium and why does it matter to you? Xtium, we are a desktop as a service provider, specifically an infrastructure as a service provider, and we serve managed service providers in the small and medium business space. We have geographically diverse data centers on the East Coast and West Coast, and our monthly recurring revenue model augments any existing point solutions that are out there. We started with desktop as a service about a year ago with Xtium, that's now part of the VMware family. It's been a great partnership. We have leveraged their product and their tools to offer a world-class desktop as a service solution to our partners, and that's part of what we're going to be discussing with you today. We are 100% committed to VMware-powered solutions, so we do not play in any other sandboxes as a company. Our entire stack is VMware and will continue to be. Will be with VMware. We feel that the tools that they have, the instrumentation, the automation is first class and certainly speaks to the level of technology and the level of service that we want to provide to our customers. So we love the Xtium relationship. We love it even more now that they're with VMware. It speaks to our business model in a big way. And for as we look ahead at 2014, our business has been growing dramatically, and specifically in this desktop as a service realm. If we looked a year ago, we were probably doing about 5% of our total revenue in desktop as a service. Our expectation is to do a minimum of 25% of our revenue in desktop as a service this year, and so we have a great partner with us, and we're looking to engage you as managed service providers to help us grow the business and also to help get your customers into a really nice, scalable, and secure desktop as a service offering. If we jump to the next slide here, I look at desktops as a service and I look at virtualization and security, and we used to think about those ideas in three unique buckets, and that's no longer the case. Today, when you look at a device, you have all types of issues you have to contend with. One is, what happens, in the example I give on the left-hand side, what happens if your MacBook Air or your laptop, a camera comes on and what are you doing? Do you have a security issue in place? Are you actually using the camera or you're not? I mean, you have all these issues that can take place as the result of just leveraging physical infrastructure. If I look at the middle of my screen here, firmware vulnerability issues, memory cards, other types of things that I can connect to a machine, dongles and other things. I mean, all of those things create issues if my desktop is just physically, sitting in front of me. And so what we think about when we think about, desktops and virtualization is how do I create a level of encapsulation between the desktop layer and between all the services that I want to consume in the cloud. And for us, it's about yeah, how do I virtualize that desktop experience? So I'm no longer worried about if somebody connects something to my machine that could create a vulnerability, or somebody at some level compromises the local physical machine. Everything is encapsulated. Everything is in the cloud now, and so it begins to create this natural security layer just because it's separate from the physical device that you're actually working in. And so we really like that from a desktop perspective. And our financial services, partners, our insurance partners, our medical partners, they really, really like the fact that that desktop is separated and it's secured. It's secured in a very, in a very smart way. And so as we jump to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Dave Peter now. He's going to speak to us a little bit about market trends, what we're seeing as it relates to desktop as a service. Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jim. Yeah, I think what everyone is seeing more and more of is the pendulum is swung, where the users today are very interested in demanding of IT to use their own devices, right? Use their iPads and their Android tablets, their MacBooks. They want to use whatever device they want from any location to access not just their desktop resources, but the resources that their desktops can get access to on the network, the shared infrastructure, the file shares and the application servers and whatnot. And this is a good thing in the sense of productivity and allowing your employees to work where they want, but it presents some significant challenges for IT. And so, we see some of the statistics about bring your own device and employee use devices on site. And, this is happening whether IT or CFOs and CTOs want it to happen or not. Next slide, please. But BYOD creates some serious challenges for IT administrators. I mean, unmanaged, unprotected device on my corporate network, sends shivers up and down their spine. So they're concerned about things like data on these extremely mobile and possibly, endpoint devices that could be stolen or lost. How do you manage these devices and ensure that they're virus-free and patched and up-to-date? And how do I contain my costs on managing such an incredible variety of endpoint devices with different operating systems and different use models? It's just, it's a really challenging area. BYOD is phenomenally interesting to the CFO and not so exciting for the IT department. Next slide, please. One way to solve these challenges with the consolidation of IT is through virtual desktops. The beauty of a virtual desktop, as Jim alluded to, is it really draws a bright line between that endpoint device, the device that the user interfaces with, and the corporate owned and managed and patched desktop in the cloud. And so it solves these problems. It gives the end user that access to their corporate data and applications from whatever device they want. IT says, go for it. Whatever, use your Kindle Fire, your Google Chromebook, your thin client, your fat client, your zero client, whatever you'd like. But IT can secure that data and those apps, because the data and the apps live on the virtual desktop in the cloud, not on the local access device. IT can more easily manage those virtual desktops because they're always on and they're always on the network, allowing them to ensure that pattern files are up to date, the OS is patched, they can manage what sites people go to if they want. But it gives the entire business better agility and flexibility. If they start a new project or acquire a new company or hire new employees, they can rapidly spin up desktops in the cloud that they know meet their needs and have the appropriate access and are secure, and just tell those new employees or that new company they bought or those new outsourced developers, just use whatever device you've already got, I don't even need to know what it is, and connect to this virtual desktop. So it really goes to solve these challenges. Next slide, please. So let's talk for a minute about what is this virtual desktop or desktop as a service or cloud-hosted virtual desktop solution. So it's really, I think of it as having three key parts. Part one is the endpoint device, the device that the employee, the end user, touches. In effect, that device, regardless of what it is just a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse. It's a way to get to the virtual desktop hosted in the cloud. I've already mentioned all the different kinds of endpoint devices, iPads, Android tablets, iPhones, Android phones, thin clients, zero clients, Mac OS, Linux machines, Windows machines, Kindle Fire, Google Chromebook, etc. So that's kind of part one. So you connect from wherever you are with that device, whether you're at home, at the office, Starbucks, in the airport, on GoGo in-flight internet, and you connect to your cloud-hosted virtual desktop. And that desktop can be running genuine Windows Desktop OS. It can be running a skin server. So the experience is the exact same as your users are used to when it comes to dealing with a desktop. Those desktops are on your corporate network, managed by your Active Directory group policies. They are full-fledged members of your environment. The end customer's network is extended to include those desktops in the cloud. The third part is connectivity to other infrastructure. Of course, a cloud-hosted desktop, just like a physical desktop, doesn't, it's not an island unto itself. It needs to access corporate file shares, back-end databases. It needs to print to network printers. It needs to connect and talk to shared corporate infrastructure. That is accomplished with a site-to-site VPN connectivity. Those shared corporate infrastructure could be on-premise at the customer's data center, wherever it is today. It could be also hosted with Xtium in the same data center, which certainly makes sense for some of the infrastructure, or it could be in some other location. Lots of flexibility there. Next slide, please. So I talked really about how virtual desktops in a generic sense solve these challenges. I'm going to kind of go back to, well, why DaaS though? Because some of you probably are aware of what I call traditional on-premise VDI solutions. VDI solutions that the customer deploys themselves in their own data center on their own hardware that they manage. And the reason DaaS is interesting is to these folks is, VDI, traditional on-premise VDI, has been around for a while now. It's proven itself that it solves these business problems. But you know what? It's expensive. There's a lot of CapEx involved. The customer has to buy the hardware. They have to hire smart people who know VDI, which is complicated. Desktop as a service is a pure OpEx utility model. It's sold on a per desktop, per month subscription basis. You also have incredible flexibility to burst up and down. I need 10 more, 50 more desktops, in the next couple of days. You can just order them up. And the solution scales up and down. You kind of pay as you go. You don't need those VDI experts, as I talked about. This environment can be managed and run and leveraged without all that really specialized, somewhat complicated VDI knowledge about hypervisors and access fabrics and connection brokers and storage IOPS, VLANs, etc. And also, even customers who have on-prem VDI are saying to themselves, you know what, I want to have cloud-hosted desktops so that I can host the desktops that are in a data center that's closer to my far-flung employees. And then really more broadly, there's reasons people are more comfortable with desktop as a service is because they're just more comfortable with cloud solutions in general. In the early days of cloud, of course, security was a major concern. And security is a big part of this solution. We understand that no customer would leverage a desktop as a service solution unless they were confident that the hosting service provider, Xtium, cannot see and access the end customer's desktops or data, and the tenants, each individual customer, is isolated from themselves. We have a good story to tell there with white papers and a lot of independent audits around the security perspective. And then for you as a service provider, cloud provider, desktop service provider, these cloud services and desktop as a service is a great platform for you to add incremental desktop management and support services and desktop engineering, and do kind of cloud aggregation, help the customer not only move their desktops to the cloud, but other infrastructure to the cloud. And it's a real differentiator in the market to help solve your customers' problems. Next slide, please. Next, please. So what is the opportunity in the market that we're seeing? Well, we commissioned Cisco to do this study, and it was very interesting to find that 2/3 of all surveyed people have DaaS, are going to deploy DaaS, or going to deploy some sort of on-prem DaaS hybrid solution. So this is the growing market. DaaS is a smaller absolute market than on-premise VDI, but it's growing much more rapidly. Again, the perfect customer is the customer who says, gosh, I think virtual desktops can solve some of my business problems, but I just don't want to be in the business of doing VDI myself. I'd rather just consume it and hold someone else accountable for delivering, in effect, a desktop SLA. Next slide, please. So I think why this is probably the most exciting part of this solution is all the opportunities for managed service providers, systems integrators, any company who's providing services, IT services, desktop services to end customers. So first of all, there's this huge potential. Customers are really interested in virtual desktops. So, to a salesperson, what that first tier in this layer cake says is easy to book meetings. The next is infrastructure as a service unto itself is becoming somewhat commoditized. So it's great to differentiate leveraging the DaaS solution. The third one down is a salesperson. You would love this, easy to try and buy model. So I mentioned that so many people are interested in virtual desktops, desktop as a service, traditional VDI, but you know what? They don't know, is this really going to produce a positive ROI for me? Will my applications work? Will my peripherals work? What will my performance be like? What users are the best users in my environment for DaaS or virtual desktops, and which are the not good users? It's difficult and expensive and time-consuming to answer those questions with a traditional VDI solution. It's a lot of work. With desktop as a service, it's easy. Xtium can provide you with free test POC desktops and then move you through a phased, careful deployment that allows you to answer those questions and understand how the solution will work specifically for you. And that's how people want to consume this service. Of course, because it's a subscription service, it provides you as a business as a recurring revenue model. There's that high switching cost. Desktop really does become an anchor tenant. Where the desktop goes, the infrastructure follows. There's significant additional infrastructure and services drag, and really this is where you come into the play. In fact, I'm going to talk more about that on the next slide. This second to last tier, the gray tier on this little pile here, I think is the most interesting one, and I want to make sure everyone really appreciates what this means. If your company today is already providing desktop management and support services to your end customers, let's say you're already doing OS patching and software distribution services and help desk and antivirus, that sort of thing today, then you are the recipient of the lower costs associated with desktops, virtual desktops. What I mean is we have a service provider that tells us, and they manage tens of thousands of end customers' desktops. They say for every 200 physical desktops, they need one tech. So one desktop service tech can manage 200 physical desktops. That same desktop management tech can manage 600 virtual desktops. Another service provider told us that when he looks at his trouble ticketing machine, the physical desktops generate 7 times as many help desk tickets than the virtual desktops. So virtual desktops are cheaper and easier to support. So if you're providing that support to your customers, deploying virtual desktops for your customers will reduce your cost. Now that cost reduction can either show up as additional margin for you or as cheaper prices for your customer, or a little bit of both to make you more competitive in the market. Next slide, please. So I promised some specifics around the infrastructure and services drag associated with desktop as a service. So this is the pitch on why would this be interesting for you to offer to your existing customers and to gain new customers. And that's because there is 100% services drag associated with desktop as a service. The services drag really falls into three categories. Category one is what I call desktop engineering services. These are really more project-based services that kind of have a clear beginning and end. They're things like image optimization, Active Directory group policy administration and optimization, data architecture and migration services. So really helping the customer move their environment and optimize and tune their environment to run well on a virtual desktop and with virtual desktops. The second category is traditional desktop management and support services. So as I said, bundling OS patching, antivirus, application patching, help desk around or on top of the Xtium desktop as a service solution. Most customers who are interested in desktop as a service expect and want those additional desktop management services included in the solution. We've seen managed service providers sell an all-you-can-eat virtual desktop for $80 per user per month. You know, it's managed, it's supported, it's virus-free, it includes the licensing, etc. The third category I call cloud aggregation. So it's, again, actually it's 100% of the time, the customer will host more than just desktops with the desktop services provider. So it allows you to aggregate and include other hosted services like Active Directory domain controller and a file server. Those would be at a minimum what the customer would want to host along with the virtual desktop. They may also want to host application servers up there as well. So it's a great way to start moving the customer to really a cloud-based infrastructure as a service solution, and you can be that integrator, aggregator of those services. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology. So the platform itself, formerly known as Xtium, now known as the Horizon DaaS platform, is specifically designed for hosting service providers. So, you know, Xtium looked around, they wanted to offer DaaS to their managed service provider partners, and they selected the now Horizon DaaS platform technology really for these reasons. This multi-tenancy capability, the ability to leverage the same VDI platform across multi-tenants, multi-end customers in a secure way, that helps keep their costs low and then therefore your costs low. The scalability, the solution is built on a grid architecture, so you just add compute and storage when you add new desktops or new customers. You don't need to add incremental VDI appliances. And the solution itself, the VDI technology itself, is all open source. There's no Microsoft Server or Microsoft SQL licenses embedded within it. I mentioned the grid-based architecture. And there's really this unified platform, single pane of glass, that allows Xtium to manage all of their different tenants from a single portal, but more importantly allows you or the customer access to a portal that allows you to manage your own infrastructure, manage the images that go on your virtual desktops, create pools of desktops, assign and map users to those desktops. And so it gives you a great deal of control over your end customer or your end customer's direct control over their environment without having to understand the technology behind all this. You know, don't need to know VDI. Next slide, please. So beyond being multi-tenancy and multi-data center, the solution is also multi-model. And here's what I mean. So let's start on the left side. So you, on behalf of your end customer, an end customer can have any one of these desktops or workspaces as a service available to them. So on the left are what we would call kind of traditional cloud-hosted VDI desktops. Those are desktops that are running a genuine Windows desktop OS, or possibly a server OS skinned to look like Windows 7. Those desktops can be persistent or non-persistent. But think of it this way, that's very much like what your customers use today. Each user has their own dedicated instance and own dedicated virtual hardware in the form of a desktop assigned to them. So that's just like what they've got today. You're just kind of forklifting their desktops and moving them to the cloud. So that's great. The next middle tier there is the shared desktops, or some people would call them session-based desktops. That's the idea where each user has a separate session, and they're connecting to a single server OS instance. It's cheaper to buy, cheaper to manage. Now, there's some restrictions. Users are not a local administrator. The performance, it can be variable because the virtual hardware is not dedicated. It's a shared desktop. But for certain users within your customers, that might be just fine, and it would be cheaper. And then farther to the right are really for users who don't even need a desktop at all. It's a published application. Maybe I use an iPad for my job. Most of what I do is local to the iPad, but I do need access to a couple of Windows-based applications, which in turn need access to my corporate infrastructure so that I can get to that corporate file share and open those PowerPoints or Word docs that are on the corporate file share. In that case, they don't even need a shared desktop or a VDI desktop. They can get away with the published application solution. So this is great because it allows you to economically solve your customers' problems and give each of their users the appropriate desktop experience that they need for their job, not more than they need. So you're reducing costs, you're reducing management capabilities. Very powerful. Next slide, please. So I like to call this our waterline slide. This is kind of really a summation. If you look at what's below the waterline, this is what Xtium provides. This is all the stuff that someone would have to concern themselves with if they were to do VDI themselves. If they were to go out and get all the hardware and software and stand it up and manage and configure it themselves. But instead, Xtium's taken all that stuff, bundled it all up, and delivered it to you in the form of a monthly desktop subscription with an SLA attached to it. Now, your opportunity above the waterline is to then take those virtual desktops, put software on them, manage them, integrate them with other infrastructure, provide all that, support and management that's cheaper with a virtual desktop, but still needs to be done. These are Windows desktops, so they still need to be checked for virus. So there's a great alignment of support and allows you to create bundled solutions that the customers want and need in order to leverage this solution. So next slide, please. And I believe at this point, I'd like to hand it back to Jim to tell us a real case study that Xtium has worked on.
Dave, thanks very much. What I'd like to do on the next slide here is talk through a case study of one of Xtium's business partners that services the Virginia geo. This business partner, they're a managed service provider. They specifically focus on providing high value-added, desktop and server management services, application management services, and other types of high-level, we'll call it high-value services to customers in the Virginia geo. So in this particular case, they were dealing with the largest family law firm in Virginia, and some of the challenges that came up were, number one, from their executive perspective, they thought that they were spending a lot of money in IT, and for the money that they were spending in IT, they thought they could get better value by looking at some newer emerging technologies, trying to apply it to their business, trying to figure out ways to take all the time that they were spending in IT fixing issues and return, some of that time and that value back to the business by looking at a cloud-like solution. One of their big issues is, for a 50-person company that had a couple offices, there was no redundancy, there was no DR. When their desktops had issues, they had to wait for a new desktop to be commissioned for the lawyers, for the staff, and that was time and money. And if you think about the redundancy issues, it's not just about time and money, but it's about perception as well. When you walk into a courtroom and your device is not able to work and you have no ability to get to your critical information, you're looking at the issues you would have with your client, number one. Number two is you're looking at continuances in the courtroom. How do you get more time so you can get your device back online? It's completely inefficient for not only you, but for your client and for everybody. So it's as much of a business perception issue, it's as much of an opportunity cost of lost time issue as it is a true lack of redundancy. And so they saw this as a major issue, and they wanted to figure out a way to fix it. The other issue they had was they had these XP desktops, and as most of you that are part of this webinar today know, it's the XP desktops are now end of life, and Microsoft is desperately trying to find ways to get people off of those because of the security implications of having those desktops and also the supportability of them. And so they had this aging production infrastructure, and they were trying to figure out a way to to solve some of those issues. And so our business partner came to us and said, help us solve this problem. And so we approached it from a desktop as a service perspective, and I'll lay out the solution here on the next slide. So first and foremost, the Xtium partnership with our partner in Virginia, it was all predicated on a couple of ground rules. Number one was we wanted to provide a highly available, highly resilient infrastructure for the customer, and we wanted to make sure that no matter what device they were using at what point in time, that they could get access to their virtual desktop experience, they could access their files, they could access the critical applications they needed to be successful in the courtroom and be successful in their office with their customers. They wanted to make sure that they had, in addition to full fault tolerance, they wanted to have backup services. They wanted to be protected in the event that something in the cloud went wrong. They wanted to have the ability to gain access to that data in another way. And they wanted, most importantly, to have a one-stop shop and a centrally managed infrastructure so they could easily deal with things around making updates, making changes, circulating information. So it was really the solution for us was pretty clear. The desktop as a service in the cloud was the right solution for our partner. The goal there was we wanted to get people up and running quickly. So as they had new lawyers coming into the environment, or they had new cases where they needed new desktops and new servers and things like that, they wanted to be able to very quickly get those environments up and running. And they found that their opportunity cost of time to deliver servers and the physical cost of servers and the physical cost of desktops, it just was cost prohibitive over time. I mean, there was really, it was expensive, it was slow, and they wanted to figure out ways to augment and speed that process up. And so one of the results that came out of them moving to the cloud, and specifically moving to a desktop as a service model, was they were able to reduce that deployment complexity. What we did for this partner, in conjunction with the partner, was we set up desktops specific for different user groups. So for example, our IT community had one set profile. We had the lawyers themselves had a different profile. We had the admins set up to a different profile, and the executive team, they had their own desktop experience. And so we were able to create those buckets for them, and then very quickly mass produce the desktops that had all of the the critical systems, your office products, your specific legal applications, we'll call it the file and print services. All of those things were very quick to deploy once we compartmentalized it and got the image to a point where they had everything that they need. So for them, it was the complexity was incredibly reduced, and they were really excited about that. Then you walk down the next piece, which was this idea of improved manageability, security, and compliance. Let's take the security piece. One of the things that they mentioned was, in the sales process with our partner, was that they were nervous about vulnerabilities, something getting onto a lawyer's laptop that then would infiltrate their network. And as you and I know, that can be a dramatic issue, not only for every desktop that you'd have to go fix, but also your server environment, your network equipment. It could have dramatic negative effects on your business. And so for them, it was how do they make it much more secure? And so the desktop as a service model is really neat. As Dave spoke to you earlier about the different types of desktop as a service, offerings that are out there under the Desktone, VMware, Xtium framework, we have the ability for this partner to be able to break down the desktop at the end of the day and bring up a new desktop the next day using the template that was previously negotiated and approved. Now, why is that important? If I think about the common virus you would have in your body. Think about the chicken pox. If I have the chicken pox, then that virus is living because I'm living. If I were to somehow if I was able to grab the chicken pox and get them out of my body and throw them on the floor, the chicken pox would die. If I tried to put them back in my body, they would be dead, right? It doesn't automatically reactivate itself because the virus has been disconnected from the host. And so our desktop as a service product is very much that way. If we found a vulnerability in the environment, guess what? We just break the desktop down at the end of the day. The files are still safe. You can still get to your files. Your user experience is still safe. Your desktop personalization, your printer mappings, all that stuff still remains the same. But now I've disconnected the files that may be of issue from the host. And so therefore they're dead. And only if you reactivate the virus when you put it all back together, and most people don't know how to do that. It's actually a fairly complex process. Chances are, when you put the files and the new desktop back together, you no longer have that security issue until somebody, in a very complex way tries to reactivate that virus. That's a very important point for managed service providers as you're selling desktop as a service to your customers. You make that point every day. Think about financial services companies. Think about medical companies and the risks they have to data breaches. And desktop as a service solves that problem for those types of companies. And so that's why we're so excited about it. Last, it's inexpensive. These desktops as a service are inexpensive. You can keep the device you've been using for years. You're going to get an icon that now you can connect in. You can make a connection. As long as you're connected to a network, you can make a connection into this desktop as a service in the cloud. And so you can use your 4-year-old or 5-year-old device, or you can go out and get a thin client. There's a bunch of different types of things that you can do. You can use your iPad or your Android device, as Dave mentioned. I mean, I do that stuff all the time. I'm on a plane. I'm using, in airplane mode, my phone to connect to my desktop, and I love it. As a matter of fact, I use it in such a funny way. I have Slingbox at home. I want to catch the World Series. I'm on a plane, so I connect into my desktop as a service. I run my Slingbox that's connected into my house, and on the plane, which normally you can't stream information, I can see a stream version through my desktop as a service of a World Series game. How cool is that? I mean, again, that's little ways in which desktop as a service works for you. So as we jump to the next slide, I mean, I guess the end result is our lawyers were happy. Our partner really had great success, and they've been able to upsell dramatically into not only this lawyer, but now into other law firms in the Virginia area, just because of their approach, how they really thought about security and the ability to drive down IT costs. And so lawyers are happy, and then obviously our partner's happy, and that makes us happy. If we jump to the next slide here, I think the most important thing as we think about here is there's tremendous market potential. We love this Desktone Xtium relationship, and the one piece that we're here to talk about is that relationship's only complete by having our managed service providers alongside of us who are able to see that value and then help drive that value for their customers. And so this I think has huge market potential for all of us. Our managed service providers, Desktone Xtium. I think it's an easy way to get in. You try before you buy. There's no commitment up front. Just get into the desktops. Get a chance to really leverage the petting zoo. Try a couple things. Make sure it works for you. Ask a lot of questions. Make sure it's really right for you as an end consumer. And then from there it becomes easy. It's a recurring revenue model, but it's also an easy cost model. You only consume the desktops you need when you need them. You don't have to overbuy infrastructure. You can size it up and down over time, and that I think that makes for a really neat model. And then the high switching cost for end customers, I think, becomes again another another part that is pretty important in the conversation. And the last slide here, just to briefly talk about, how do we start the conversation around partnering? I think the first piece is that we've got a very streamlined, very simple approach for partnering. As you call us and engage us, we'll make sure that we register not only you, but we'll register your customers and your prospects. That way, there's no channel conflict. There's none of those other things that you may see out in the field as you're dealing with other service providers. We'll provide a combination of a couple things. We can either provide referral revenue as you come in contact with customers. We can white label and resell, white label our services so you can resell it as a managed service provider. We can do a combination of the two. It just depends on what the specific use case is, but we're very flexible. The goal is we want to enable your business to grow, and in turn that enables our business to grow. In addition to the desktop as a service, our partners have access to our other products and services, and so we have infrastructure as a service in the cloud hosting space, in the virtual disaster recovery space, as well as what we're talking about today, the desktop as a service space. We price to win. We try to be as cost effective as possible while providing the right level of service to our partners. And so we try to make sure we're as aggressive as possible, and you should see that and hopefully be able to leverage that aggressiveness as you get aggressive with customers to try to take down new business or upsell into existing business. And I would say most importantly, in addition to our sales support and our partner tools and our back-end service for our partners, we have this fully fault-tolerant, fully redundant East Coast and West Coast infrastructure presence that ensures that your applications, your desktops, your systems are always available. And so with that said, I did want to thank everybody for their time, and especially wanted to thank Dave from VMware, who provided a great presentation on the market, and what we're seeing in the market, as well as how the Desktone VMware product works. I think it was a really valuable use of time. So thank you all for attending our webinar. Have a great day.